Welcome back, Social 10. Today we're going to revisit the concept of ideologies, and we're going to add some new individuals into your cast of characters. And good news, before you leave here today, you'll get to be quizzed on it, because that's a new direction we're going in response to some deficiencies that we've seen in class. So, to review, what is an ideology? An ideology was seen as a set of beliefs and values. It's the way we see the world. It's the world that we want to create. And within that lesson on ideologies, we talked about how some people, they value what we call individualism. They value things like self-interest, uniqueness, and freedom from government. But we also saw we saw a collection of people called collectivism. And they want to see collective interest, collective responsibility, the common good, and conformity. From there, we looked at some specific ideologies. One of the specific ideologies we looked at was Adam Smith. And Adam Smith, he looked into the role that the government was playing in the economy, and he said that it was too much. The government had their hands on the economy too much. And the system in place at the time was called mercantilism, and the government's role within mercantilism was they would grant royal monopolies to corporations like the Hudson Bay Company or the British East India Company. And Adam Smith argued that this was actually reducing the potential wealth of the nation, that the nation could be wealthier if instead of practicing monopolies and mercantilism, they would allow more competition. They would allow more freedom in the marketplace. So he came up with the concept of laissez-faire, leave it alone, hands off the economy, that we call capitalism today. It's a free market approach to economics based on economic individualism. We often refer to it as classic liberalism. So down here in the chart we have Smith. His ideology is classic liberalism. On an economic sense, what is classic liberalism? It is capitalism. And with each of these ideologies, there's some insight into the nature of mankind. And then from that we have the if this then what idea, right? So Adam Smith looked into the nature of mankind and said, you know what, mankind's rational. They're reasonable. And therefore, they can be self-governing. Because you're rational, because you're reasonable, then your economic interest can be your domain. No one needs to parent you in that. No one needs to guide you and regulate your economic lives because you're rational and reasonable. So, what's the role of government under Adam Smith? Well, there should be less government. Less government than what we had seen under mercantilism. So government shouldn't be in the business of business, but they shouldn't be in the business of creating monopolies and regulating who can have access to certain markets. The government needs to. Do you need me, sir?
Just in the binder. Are they any in the social office?
Like any binder?
Yeah, just any binder.
Like a blank binder?
Yeah, I'm just putting together a great
Does black work for you, sir?
Yeah, that's perfect. Oh my gosh. That's insane.
It's a gift from me to you, sir.
Look, we're just making our PD. Grade 9 social multiple choice test.
My pleasure, sir.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
No worries.
Hi, what are we learning today?
We're talking about ideologies. We're back revisiting Adam Smith so that we can connect to Karl Marx, because today we're introducing Keynes and Hayek, and we can't introduce those in isolation without going back. Because what is Keynes? It's a modification of Smith. And what is Hayek? A rejection of Keynes. So we need to have these in order.
Now, Marx, correct me if I'm wrong. What was that? Are you filming?
Of course, yeah.
Oh, sorry.
No worries.
Gosh, that was nervous.
Yeah.
Energy.
Always good to see you, sir.
Oh, that's good.
So I believe I was talking about Adam Smith. And I believe I may be re-recording this in period 4, or I might just leave it like this, because this is the existence of a teacher, right? So we have classic liberalism, we have capitalism. His idea of the nature of man is that we're reasonable, we're rational, therefore we can be self-governing. So what is the role of government? Well, we need less government. Less than what? Less than he had been seeing under mercantilism. Under mercantilism, the government was in this position of granting special monopolies for insiders. And that would reduce the size of the economy. So he said that in terms of the role of government, in a capitalist economy, the government should create legislation to protect business, so property rights, They should ensure that the rule of law governs the marketplace. So there needs to be, laws in the marketplace in terms of making sure there's not a lot of criminal presence, that it's safe to go to the marketplace. But aside from that, government needs to keep their hands off. So rule of law just means to pass into law the idea that you have property rights. Because if you take away property rights, you take away a core of the idea of why we work. If we have the freedom to work independent of government, but also others have the freedom to steal from you the fruits of your labor, then you have less motivation to be laborious, right? So we do need some government presence to protect the fruit that you have been able to, in your self-interest, accumulate. So we have some role of government, not no role, but very limited role. They're going to create property legislation, they're going to ensure competition, and they're going to ensure the rule of law. But what they're not doing, they're not in the business of answering the three basic economic questions. So under Adam Smith, how do we answer the three basic economic questions? Through greed. What should we produce? What are people demanding? What should we produce? What is profitable? So if I'm a producer and I know that people are just going crazy for red staplers, then I should produce red staplers, not black ones. If no one's buying the black ones, if demand is high for the red ones and low for the black ones, then producers, guided by the or the invisible hand, guided by greed, they're going to produce what people want. There's a built-in efficiency to greed because we have limited resources. We have scarcity, right? So how do we ensure that the scarce resources are allocated towards what people want? Let them vote with their dollars. That's the most democratic thing possible. The capitalism is actually democratic in the sense that people are going to vote for the product that they want people to build. So if no one's buying these black staplers anymore, then producers wanting to be profitable are going to stop making them. And then in the future, if people want them again, they're very nostalgic, then they'll bring them back. They'll reintroduce them. So the key to the role of citizens is citizens shape the economy by voting with their dollars, right? In a free market, citizens, through putting in demand for this is what we want. Now we shouldn't have misallocation of resources. In North Korea today, the citizens aren't the ones saying we want nuclear weapons. It's the government misallocating resources, scarce resources towards that at the expense of people getting enough food to eat. So under Smith, we have what is the ideology? It's capitalism. What is the essence of it? Well, the essence of the ideology is that people are by nature rational, reasonable, can be self-governing. What's the role of government? Well, very limited, to be honest. They will create legislation to protect property. They need to ensure competition, ensure that the market is safe, but that's it. What's the role of individuals? To be guided by their greed too. As consumers, we'll put in demands in the marketplace, and as consumers, we'll have to find our niche. We'll have to find a job, right? So you'll be able to find this cast of characters in the lesson 16. Next up, let's review Karl Marx. So Marx is a rejection of Smith. He says, no, capitalism is cruel. Because mankind by nature is exploitive. What capitalism has done, the freedom in the market has allowed the strong to do what they want and the weak to suffer what they must. It allows for exploitation. It allows for the inequity, right? The inequality, the disparity between rich and poor to grow to the extent that today in 2021 we talk about the 1%, the 99%. Tesla stock's up 15% in the last 7 days. Elon Musk is probably worth $125 billion now. And collectively, all of us and all of our families are not. He's worth more than everyone that all of us are related to. That's inequality possible through capitalism. So Karl Marx said, by nature, mankind's exploitive. So his solution was citizens would have an epiphany, right? They'd have an awakening. And that epiphany would lead to a revolution. And the workers would win because they'll control the means of production. And then they will create a dictatorship of the workers, the proletariat. And ultimately, the job of the government is to change the hearts and minds of the people towards collectivism, so that each day we wake up saying, what can I do for the group? From each according to his ability to each according to his need. I don't wake up in the morning thinking, how much can I serve Russ McBride? But what can I do to serve you? That's a Marxist point of view, right? And they're willing to use techniques of dictatorship to change the hearts and minds, including indoctrination, propaganda, force, terror, intimidation, purges. All of this so far, a review of about a week ago. So at this point, if during the review you're like, wow, I don't remember any of this, that's like a nice little reminder that we need to go back and keep revisiting the curriculum we've studied. Because although Marx and Smith were on the last test, they'll also be on the next midterm. Why? Because the topics we see today fit nicely into them. First topic we're looking at today is a man called John Maynard Keynes. We just have Keynes up. We don't call him John. He's not your buddy. You can just call him Keynes. And the nice thing about his ideology is it's named after him, so it's easy to remember. Keynesian economics, sometimes referred to as Keynesian or Keynesian. So we just have his last name, Keynes, K-E-Y-N-E-S, and then I-A-N at the end. So what is his economics? Well, one way to look at it is it's a movement away from Adam Smith. So Adam Smith said that we need freedom from government. Keynes is saying we need freedom through government. So Adam Smith said we need freedom from government. How do we have a good life? I need government to get their hands off my economic life, and then I'll be able to have a better economic life. So the path to a good life for Adam Smith, less government, right? Path to a good life for Keynes, we need more government. We need freedom through government. This is a revolution in thinking. So, being that it's a new form of liberalism, we call this modern liberalism. If Smith is classical liberalism, Keynes is modern liberalism. It's introduced in the 20th century, and at that time it was seen as a modern way of thinking. So far in this column, the column on the left, we had Keynesian economics, aka modern economic liberalism. It's a revolution away from the free market approach of Adam Smith, because now we think that instead of freedom from government, we need freedom through government. But that doesn't explain why. That just says what it is. Why do we need it? Well, we need it because of the nature of man. Mankind is emotional. Literally, mankind's emotions are like a roller coaster, and when we allow our emotions to shape the economy begins to be like a roller coaster. And Adam Smith would say a roller coaster can be self-correcting. That boom times will correct and become bust, and bust times will correct and become boom. So from Adam Smith, during a boom time, prices will become so high, people will stop spending, and then the boom will collapse. Kind of like a housing bubble. There'll be a point where people will be unwilling to pay $3 million for a modest home in Toronto, and people might say, you know what? Housing in Toronto is too expensive. And then that bubble will begin to collapse and prices will go down. So Adam Smith would say, just let the market regulate that. Let the emotions of mankind regulate that. When prices get too high, mankind will say, you know what, I'm not going to buy, because mankind's rational and reasonable. Well, Keynes is saying, no, mankind's not rational and reasonable. Keynes is saying mankind can be panicky. It can be like, oh, I'm a little worried. Well, I'm a little worried right now. So that because I'm a little worried, I might not do what's in my best interest. So Keynes is making these observations during the Great Depression, during the beginning years. So during the Great Depression, beginning in October 1929, October 29th, I was just seeing what day it was today, it's the 26th, so almost the anniversary is today, but the market collapses to the point that some things are devalued by 90%. A good time to buy. But people weren't buying because they were still panicking. If mankind was rational, if mankind was reasonable, mankind would have recognized the great opportunity that the Great Depression was, and they would have invested. They would have said, wow, look at the prices. They've adjusted. and now they are undervalued, and this is showing me that it's a good time to jump into the market. But instead of jumping into the market, people were so fearful, they hoarded their money. And by hoarding the money, and by not consuming products, there was less money in circulation, and the economy actually shrank. And as the economy shrank, then employers had to say to employees, we don't need you anymore. So quite quickly in America, 25% of people across the US was unemployed, and in places it was 80%. So the Great Depression was caused by the emotional reaction by mankind. Rather than being rational and reasonable, mankind had been causing the Great Depression. Mankind caused it by being exploitive and speculative, right? They gambled on the stock market. We made foolish investments not understanding it. And then when the investments collapsed and actually the prices were suddenly good, people didn't buy in then either. So they bought in when it was too high, didn't buy in when it was too low. We weren't acting in our best interest. So what did Keynes say? The government has a role to play here. Because mankind is panicking, then government needs to, smooth it out. So FDR is going to say the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. And he's inspired by Keynes, because he understands now that the government has a new role to play. So what is the role? Well, the government is going to regulate the business cycle. We're not going to let those booms become too big or the busts to become too big. We're going to regulate it. Because if a boom becomes too inflated, that bubble bursts. It's not sustainable. Or if a bust becomes so deep, then people panic, and then we fall into a Great Depression. So to Keynes, the role of government was to regulate that, to level it out a little bit so it wasn't as jarring, the booms and busts. So he introduced two new policies. One is fiscal, one is monetary. And all of this you're going to see again in grade 12. This is one of those bridges, a very big bridge. These are some of the concepts, fiscal, monetary policy, the grade 12 struggle with the most. So again, I have a plan for you that you're going to do extremely well in the diploma in grade 12, and that begins now. We're working on it now. We're connecting what we're studying now to then so that we can understand the big picture here. So what is fiscal and monetary policy? Fiscal policy is when the government simply taxes or spends. So under Adam Smith, the government shouldn't really be doing either of those. The government should be doing very little, right? But under Keynes, the idea is that, no, you know what? The government could increase taxes to slow the inflation, to slow the boom, to slow the hyperinflationary bubble, and then when the bust begins, decrease taxes and encourage spending. So we tax in good times, spend in bad, to level out the economy. This is fiscal policy. So in a contemporary world, many people in the last 3 years have been looking at the fiscal policy of the Federal Liberal Party, because during our COVID recession, they spent hundreds of billions of dollars. And that is money now that they have borrowed from your future earnings, that at some point you will need to pay that bill in income tax and in property tax and in sales tax and luxury tax, that the government has to pay the bill that they have created by their fiscal policy. So Trudeau recognized that the economy had plummeted last March of 2020, and he said, here, I need to inject ourselves as the solution. Freedom through government. Here's a CERB check. Freedom through government. Here's some relief for those who may lose their homes. We'll pay your mortgage for you. Here's some stimulus spending. And this is also common in Joe Biden's America, where the government has had to shut down this month because they have no money left. They've done so much stimulus spending. And many people fear that this is too much government, too much freedom through government, and what it is creating is a mountain of debt, which will be system collapsing in the future. Intergenerational tyranny, something we pass on, debt to you. The other thing is monetary policy. I don't know, who has a savings account in here? Anyone? You want to have a savings account? What's your interest rate right now? I have a savings account. I put, you know, I don't mind talking about money in class. I'm not rich. I put $13,000 into a savings account in September. At the end of September, I had $13,003. I made 3 cents interest. Is that motivation for me to leave that money in there? Again, let's go back to Tesla stock. Tesla stock went up by 5% today. Tesla stock is up 15% the last 7 days. I would make more investing in Tesla in 7 days than I would in a decade of putting my money in savings right now. So low interest rates are a reason for me to say, you know what, I'm taking my money out of the bank, I'm going to spend it, I'm going to invest it. So you can use monetary policy to manipulate the economy. You keep interest rates low, people spend money. If you want them to stop spending money, you raise interest rates. A lot of people are fearful right now because we have high inflation, highest we've seen in 20 years, and low interest rates. So one way to correct that will be to raise interest rates to discourage spending. Because prices are bubbling up very high because people are spending a lot of money. People are going into debt, a lot of private debt. So far today, we reviewed Adam Smith, we reviewed Karl Marx, and we saw how classic liberalism of Smith became modern liberalism of Keynes. And in modern liberalism, it's the role of government to provide freedom through them. What is the role of citizen then in modern liberalism? To work with the government to stabilize the economy by demanding. That's why we sometimes call Keynesian economics demand-side economics, because the role of the citizen is to stimulate the economy. It's the multiplier effect. If I go get a haircut, that's probably a waste of money, I have no hair. But then if I pay like $50 to get a haircut, I don't know, it's been a while since I had one. I don't know what haircuts cost these days. But let's say I pay someone $50 for a haircut. Then that individual, my barber, my hairstylist, they have $50 that they can go and spend somewhere else in the economy. So then they take the $50 down to the grocery store and they buy some apples. And now the people at the grocery store have made $50. And then the person who sold apples to the grocery store, now they've made $50. Now the person at the apple place that gets paid for those apples, tracing the money back, maybe he takes those $50 and he buys, you know, some new mud flaps for his truck. Now we got a guy selling mud flaps. This is the multiplying effect of money. So every $50 invested in the economy may create $300 of new wealth. And the problem with the Great Depression was people weren't investing. They were hoarding the money. So Keynes, the role of government under Keynes was to stabilize the economy, but the role of citizens, get out there and spend some money. Otherwise, the Depression it lasted a decade. It could have lasted longer. And the one thing we don't recognize is during the Depression, prices were going down. That's why people weren't spending, because they're like, well, you know what? I could buy that new car this month, but if it's going to cost less next month, why don't I just wait? And people were waiting so long, people were losing their jobs. Ford doesn't need to make new cars if they have thousands sitting unclaimed, unpurchased. That's literally what happened with the Ford Motor Company. So any questions about Keynes? Do we see how it's different than Smith? Freedom through government. Do we see how it's, though, different than Marx? He's not saying, you know, dictatorship of the workers. He's not saying non-liberalism. He's not saying let's get rid of liberalism. He's not saying we need a revolution, create a new political system, a new social system, a new economic system. It's revolutionary thinking because it's something new, but it's not as radical. It's still liberalism, it's just liberalism with more government. So because of Keynesian style thinking in Canada, we get the CPP, we get UIC, unemployment insurance, we get universal health care, we get more money invested in public education. So a lot of the things we recognize as Canadian can be traced back to Keynesian-like thinking, modern liberalism. One last person to talk about today, or two people actually, Hayek and Friedman. And to kind of make this short and sweet, Hayek and Friedman say, wow, we've messed up here. So you know how I've been talking about paradigm shifts? So we had mercantilism, government had their hands on business, then a paradigm shift. Adam Smith said no, hands-off business. Then we had Keynes saying no, we need government to put their hands back on the economy a little bit, right? Freedom through government. Now we got these guys saying no, let's go back to Adam Smith. We need less government together. So it's another shift, in this case back to individualism, back to classic liberalism. But if we simply call Hayek and Friedman classic liberals, that might be confusing. Because classic liberals like Adam Smith lived in the 18th century. Hayek and Friedman are of the 20th and 21st centuries. So we need a term that makes it clear that they value what Adam Smith valued, but they value that today. So we create this term called new classical liberalism. So in summary so far, we have classical liberalism, which is Smith, modern liberalism, which is Keynes. Now we have neoclassical liberalism. These guys want to go back to classic liberalism. So, all of the things here are the exact same things I had under Smith. What are we? We're rational. Therefore, we should let greed, not government, shape the economy. Therefore, individuals should be guided by the invisible hand, and that should answer the three basic economic questions. This is all literally copied and pasted. So return back to Smith. So as long as you know Smith, you know Friedman and Hayek. Is there a little bit more to their story than that? Of course there is. There's going to be more we'll talk about in grade 12. So we have classic liberalism, modern liberalism, neoclassic liberalism, and what is Marxism? That's non-liberalism. They don't like liberalism at all, right? So I'm going to give you 7 minutes. Get ready for your Barbie discussion. We'll have that quickly, and then we'll have a quiz on this.